Peace was good. You read the title. You know what I want to talk about. The top 20 hip hop albums of all time, in my opinion. My top 20 hip hop albums of all time. Without further ado, let's start with the albums. But before I start, I'm gonna do a disclaimer. If you're expecting like Mobb, the typical classics, the obvious classics like Illmatic, the infamous, Dr. Dre's Chronic, Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt, those are all good albums. I like those albums, but you're gonna be disappointed because I'm gonna talk about albums that, in my opinion, doesn't really get a lot of praise, and it's albums that I could play, front to back without skipping a track. Just never getting bored. You know what I mean? And without further ado, here's the first album, and it's no particular order. You know what I mean? So, first album is Busta Rhymes' first album, The Comin', released in '96. I mean, this album is classic material. I mean, this is around the time where, Busta Rhymes, was known to be on guest appearance, be on other people's tracks like he is now. But people didn't really take him serious about making a solo album, which you could sort of understand because, he's all wild and flamboyant and just wild, he's just animated and shit like that. But with this album, he proved people wrong. You know what I mean? Like with this album, he he had a ill concept, like with the world's coming to the end in 2000, which we already know it didn't because we're still here. You know what I mean? And I don't think 2012 the world's gonna end either. I think that's all bullshit. But I mean, this is classic material. I mean, songs like Flip Mode Squad meets Death Squad. I mean, come on. I mean, all those guys were in the A game. You know what I mean? Like the beats by Easy Mo B, DJ Scratch. In my opinion, those two are very underrated producers. The Uma, which is pretty much Q-Tip and JD or J Dilla for my J Dilla fans. I mean, beats from them. I mean, you can't go wrong. Pretty solid album. This is like my all-time favorite album from Busta Rhymes. Although I like the first four Busta Rhymes albums, but this album tops the cake. I mean, this album definitely is original. Dope beats, dope production, dope lyrics. You can listen to it. I mean, songs like Abandoned Ship with him and Rampage, his cousin. I mean, you can't go wrong. Like I said, that song Flip Mode meets Death Squad. Classic song. I don't know why that song doesn't get mentioned in hip hop discussions. I mean, people always talk about the Scenario remix and Posse cuts. Those are all good, but Flip Mode Squad meets Death Squad, in my opinion, kind of tops all that shit. In my opinion, but this is The Comin' by Busta Rhymes, released in '96. Definitely go cop, must have. Next album is Method Man's Tical 2000, released in 1998. Another banger. Definitely his most, definitely is like his most overlooked album in my opinion, especially the first one, which is in this collection. I'll get into that, but this album he has like again with Busta Rhymes, the world coming to an end, but he kind of went deeper than that. He started talking about the Illuminati and shit like that. And this is before the whole Illuminati bandwagon. You had cats like Method Man, Killer Army, Killer Priest, Sons of Man, Onyx talking about the Illuminati, but people didn't pay attention. People just thought they were just talking about a bunch of bullshit, you know what I mean? But that's not the case. I mean, the beats are definitely dark as hell. They have that post-apocalyptic feel to the album. It has that nice feel to that dark feel, like I said before. I mean, songs like Dangerous Ground with Street Life, songs like Element, Place for Keeps with Mobb Deep and I think Inspector Deck, and of course Method Man is in that song. I mean, you can't go wrong with this album. This is definitely one of his best albums. You know what I mean? Like I said, his first two albums are my favorite. Tical Zero, the prequel, I was very disappointed with that. Definitely wasn't a prequel. That was a horrible album. 421, The Day After was okay. Could have been a little bit better. But that album was a little bit better than Tical Zero, the prequel. But this album, definitely a classic album. Definitely his most underrated album in my opinion. This is Cal 2000 Judgement Day, released in 1998. Of course, Redman's Muddy Waters. Definitely one of my favorite albums from him. I mean, obviously, like I said, his first three albums are my favorite albums from him. But this album definitely tops the cake. I think it's in everybody's, it definitely everybody's, favorite Redman album. This is Redman in his prime. You know what I mean? Even with Dare Iz A Darkside. But a lot of people kind of got, a little alienated with Dare Iz A Darkside. But with this album, he kind of came back with this album. I mean, the beats, by Eric Sermon, Rockwilder. You can't go wrong. I mean, the skits are funny as hell, which is very hard to find these days. Because I hear a lot of hip hop albums today, and the skits that they have is not comparable to the albums from the 90s. Redman always had ill skits, in my opinion. You know what I mean? With with this, he had like with the news reporter, and there's a skit called, give me 1 second, called The Stick Up, where he sticks up the bus, the city bus. For all my cats that live in New York or like in the in the metropolitan area, you guys would know about the city buses and stuff like that. And like I said, like the beats, stuff like that. One of my all-time favorite songs off this album is a song called The Ill Out with Keith Murray and Jamal. Oh my god, like one of Eric Sermon's illest beats in my opinion. They went in. To me, who had the illest verse in that song? Damn, I would say Lil Jamal. Yes, the same Jamal that that did the Last Chances No Breaks album. Dope album. I did a review on that. But I don't know. It's in between. It's in between Keith Murray. I don't know, cause Redman, he does his thing on that song too. But definitely Muddy Waters, Redman. He's supposed to come on Muddy Waters Part 2 or Muddy Waters Even Muddier. We'll see how that goes, because when a lot of artists do sequel albums, they end up being disappointed. Like War Report 2 with Capone-N-Noreaga, Starr X's Wild Cowboys. I wasn't Part 2. I wasn't crazy about that. But hopefully this album, he says he's gonna bring it back to 96, 97. We'll see, man. For me, when you're gonna do an album like this, to remake it or do a sequel, you have to use the old machines that you used from the first album. That's just my opinion, to make it authentic. Especially if you're gonna say you're gonna bring it back to 96, 97. But this is Redman, Muddy Waters, released in 96. Definitely cop this album. Gangstar's Fourth album, Hard to Earn, released in 1994. Oh man, this album, classic album in my opinion. This is a time where where in this album, if you notice with the early albums like Daily Operation, Step in the Arena, and like Norman Mr. Nice Guy, the samples that they used were like more melodic. This album was like more stripped down, simplistic, but like real raw, gritty samples. This is definitely their darkest album in my opinion. You got songs like Tons of Guns, where one of my all-time favorite songs from the album is Ton of Guns, excuse me. He talks about the dangers of guns and shit like that. Speak of Clout, which is like one of the all-time illest posse cuts. Not posse cuts, but like one of the illest songs in hip hop history. And what I like about that song, Speak of Clout, is like DJ Premier did on the I'm the Man on the Daily Operation album. He switched beats throughout. J. Rule, he would spit one verse, it'll be a different beat, and when Lil Dap does it, spits his verse, is a different beat. And same goes for Guru. You can't go wrong with that. And what made me got this album, I mean, because I'm a fan of Gangstar, but it was the song Mass Appeal. I mean, it's a simple song, but the beat is like crazy. It's dope. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't sound like from 1994. It definitely has like a modern feel to it. It's like timeless music. You know what I mean? Hard to Earn by Gangstar, released in 1994. My opinion, the best album, the darkest. A lot of people say Moment of Truth, even Primo himself. That's all good. I tend to disagree, but that's just my opinion. Like I said, it's my top 20. But it's Hard to Earn. Definitely the most overlooked in my the most overlooked album. Very underrated. Capone-N-Noreaga's The War Report, released in 1997. This album is timeless music. This album, I mean, this is Noreaga and Capone in their prime. The beats were ill. I mean, when you get beats from like, Charlemagne of Natural Element fame, Tragic Gaddafi making the beats. By the way, Tragic Gaddafi, what up? Peace. He definitely he put them on. He found them. He put them on. He actually like I said, he did some of the beats. Habit did a couple of beats, and countless others. Nasheem Merrick, he did a couple of beats on them. I mean, you can't go wrong. This is Queensbridge hip hop, like that sound that's missing today, in my opinion. Really love this album. I mean, the fact that they were like the only cast in New York to really go publicly and make a video to this in LA after when the Dog Pound made that song New York, New York, to make a song called LA, LA. That takes a lot of guts, especially around that time. You know what I mean? But The War Report, Capone-N-Noreaga, released in '97. I wish they made an album just like this. The Reunion was a dope album. I don't have that album in my collection. If I do find it, I will pick it up. That was a good album too, and that was the last good album they put out, because when they put out War Report 2, it was kind of iffy. You know what I mean? Even Tragic Gaddafi himself said the album was kind of iffy. He felt like if they waited for Tragic Gaddafi to go out of jail, and because I think he executively produced this album. See, if they waited for Tragic Gaddafi and let Tragic Gaddafi executively produce The War Report Part 2, I think it would have been a better album. And he says that himself, you know what I mean? And I definitely agree with that, because based on the beat selections, I mean, you can't go wrong with that. This is The War Report, released in 1997. See how much time I got left. Then we got Dare Iz A Darkside. I did a long ass review. This is Redman. He definitely does his thing on this album. Like I said, a lot of people kind of sleep on this album because of the beats, because a lot of people wanted another What The album, and he just did the opposite. I like the fact that Redman did most of the beats. Eric Shimon did a couple of beats, like Can't Wait. Rockwilder, he did a couple of beats. This is when Rockwilder was just first starting. This is definitely Redman's most underrated album, in my opinion. And if like I said before, like if you go to concerts and they play Redman Redman songs, it's mostly songs from like either Muddy Waters or What The album, like songs like Time for Some Action, and songs like Whatever Man, Pick It Up, and shit like that. You know what I mean? But this album, definitely his darkest album, his most experimental, his most bugged out album. Definitely a must copy in your collection. Mobb Deep's Hell on Earth, released in 1986. In my opinion, I think this album was better than The Infamous. I know most people might disagree with me, but here's my reason. First of all, this is the first Mobb Deep album I ever copped. When they was making this album, they was kind of going through a lot. Scarface, Twin Gambino. For all my Mobb fans, you guys would know about Twin Gambino. His twin brother, you know, got killed in a car accident and things like that. The beats were like atmospheric. You know, they was kind of going through a lot of deaths around this time. Um, it's a pretty solid album. I mean, the beats. This is the only album that they did all the beats. Cause if you notice, a lot of the Mobb Deep albums they had guest appearances. Like in the first Juvenile Hell, they had like Primo, they had Large Professor, some other no name, not no name, but unknown producers at that time. And Infamous, you know, they did the majority of the beats, but Q-Tip did like 3 of the beats of the album. And but this album to me is the only album that they made all the beats. And not only that, but a lot of people from the underground, and especially a lot of French producers, were kind of like, I don't want to say bite, but they were kind of influenced by Havoc's, you know, drums, like his drum samples, like the way he pitched the drums and stuff like that. Especially a lot of New York East Coast hip hop, like especially like around like 97, 98, you know, stuff like that. Especially with French hip hop, they was using a lot of Havoc drums, or like trying to make their drums sound like Havoc's and stuff like that. Definitely their darkest album. Like I said, and at the time when I bought this album, I bought this in 2001. I was kind of going through some shit myself, you know. I was kind of like, you know, depressed and shit like that, and this album kind of brought me through. You know, so I could relate to what they were saying, you know, especially with the death, people dying and shit like that. You know what I mean? But this is Mobb Deep's Hell on Earth, released in 1986. Oh, and by the way, too, around this time too, they have a bonus song off this album called In the Long Run, where Prodigy talks about having beef with Keith Murray, how he talks about how Keith Murray snuffed Prodigy in front of the cops and blah 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 blah, did this and that forth. And for all my mixtape heads, if you could find it, because I'm pretty sure it's very hard to come by, or you could just go on J Love's his website. Um, Whereas the Mob Misses, it's J Love, the Mob Misses series, especially like the first 2 Mob Misses, there was a lot of songs that they made for this album that was cut off, that they made, you know, around the Hell on Earth era, you know what I mean? And songs that they made back in 96, 97 that still had that Hell on Earth sound, you'll definitely find in those first 2 Mob Misses albums. So if you find those albums, definitely go cop them. If not, you could download them. I know most people download them shits, but you know, it is what it is. If you're a fan of Mobb Deep, you definitely should go cop those mixtapes or download them, whatever. But if you're a fan of Hell on Earth, you definitely go cop those mixtapes. But this album, in my opinion, their best album. And that's how I'm gonna cut it short right there. And I'll, you know, there's a part 2 because my joint is kind of long. So hope you guys enjoyed part 1. Peace.